Thank you, Laura. I am Stephanie Lynch, and I am excited about this. We've been participating as OHD in Safe Plus Sound Week. I want to say since I started here, so this would be either our 6th or 7th year. And I'd like to think that we're reaching a lot of people, which is really cool. And especially kind of right now, it's really good to see OSHA still putting out info, and we're really happy to participate. Obviously, we have a vested interest in people staying safe. Okay, so we're going to talk today about some heat stress monitoring basics, and we're just going to roll right into stuff. So foundationally, right, what is heat stress? Our bodies are going to have mechanisms for handling heat. But if we're not able to handle it efficiently enough, or if we don't get an appropriate amount of relief, then our bodies are going to overheat. So that's just all of this burden that's being put on your body by heat and how you're able to manage it. And it's going to be, your body's own heat, the environmental factors, and then your personal risk factors, which we'll dive into. But heat illnesses have a wide range of symptoms and a broad range of severity. It's important to note that they don't have to progress. So you're not going to necessarily start with, either a heat rash or cramps and then go into heat exhaustion or heat stroke. You can go straight to heat stroke. I actually gave a heat stress training last week and had 2 attendees who had done that and gone straight to heat stroke. And just for the record, you never fully recover from that. People have very different levels of sensitivity. But so once you have had a heat illness, you're more likely then you're already sort of at a deficit for how you manage that heat burden. So these are some of those operations that might induce heat stress. This is not an exhaustive list, obviously, but it would be a concern when you have hot air, right? What is our most common radiant heat source?
The sun.
The sun. Good job, Laura. Yes. So, when you're talking about outdoor workers, that's someone who's going to be at a big risk. There's also, foundries, furnaces. Laura and I are in Alabama, so we know something about humidity, and high humidity is going to impact our ability to manage heat in a really strong way. There's also direct contact with hot objects. Obviously that's going to be a concern at places like a furnace, but even sort of less obviously, not too long ago, just a few weeks ago, I've already mentioned we're in Alabama, but I was going to a Mexican restaurant and I went to sit to wait to be seated for a moment, and they had painted the bottom half of their windows black where you would then sit against, and it was facing the afternoon sun. And just as I leaned back, I had a bare arm, and that bare arm touched that painted window. And it had gotten so hot that it was able to, make me pull my arm away. And of course, I then told them, and they didn't care very much. But I imagine if someone does get injured, they're going to have a lot more to care about. But you also want to be concerned about how hard your guys are having to work. So how strenuous is the work you're doing, especially if you are, in contact with hot objects, or you're in a very hot environment. All those are going to play a role in inducing heat stress, or how you might be able to manage that heat stress. So why are we going to care about this? If you're here, then I have pretty good reason to believe that you care. And obviously we understand that a person who experiences a heat illness is being harmed, right? But so 11 laborers a day are going to suffer serious or fatal heat-related injury. And it's important to note that it does impact that person, obviously. And like I mentioned, they're going to be set up, they're going to be at a deficit for how they manage heat in the future, those that survive. But this impacts your entire work group. People, when you have a group that's working together and a guy goes down, even if he is able to come back to work, you're now left a man down, which has an impact on your crew's ability to work. But there's a different thing that happens there. We're humans, and we're impacted by someone else experiencing that. And it can just take a huge toll on your crew. I also believe that heat-related illness, and I'm not in a silo here, heat-related illness is likely underreported. You think about it, and there's, if you're starting to succumb to the burden of heat, you might become confused, you might become disoriented, you can get very sleepy, and all of those things could lead to accidents that then maybe they're not going to be related back to the heat. I think about when I worked at a steel mill. We had a guy who wandered into a run where steel pipe was. We were just using gravity to move pipe from one place to another, and he'd gone into that run and he got crushed, which is terrible. And he did unfortunately pass away. But we never looked at heat as a cause for that. And looking back, I do wonder, maybe he wasn't trying to take a shortcut. Maybe he really had just become disoriented. So heat can also do things like cause your safety glasses to fog up. It can make your hands become sweaty. Both of those things can obviously contribute to an accident. And that's something else that might not be tracked back to the heat. So heat kills, shockingly to me, heat kills more people than any other weather-related occurrence. And no matter why, it is getting hotter. So 18 of the last 19 years were the hottest on record, and we're on track for that to be 19 of the last 20. So those are some of the reasons we should care. Okay, I mentioned that we're going to talk about these different risk factors. I'm not really sure how well you can see this graphic. From our view, it's a little blurry maybe, but these are the environmental and individual risk factors for heat stress. What we have listed out right here is the environmental risk factors. This is a source from NIOSH. If you do need resources from NIOSH, I would highly recommend you go download them now. They have been disappearing, so get them while you can. But so this is those environmental risk factors, and these are the more obvious culprits that we kind of, I feel like we just covered pretty well. So if you've got a hot temperature, if it's if you've got high humidity, all those environmental factors. These are the trickier ones. These are the individual factors, and this is where you're going to have to rely on your employees' understanding of these risks. You're going to have to count on them being well trained, which is obviously the onus is going to be on you as the employer. And you want to make sure that they're well equipped to handle that increased risk. There needs to be a culture of trust, right? This is not something that you can get overnight. You have to have built a foundation of trust, and your employees have to know if this is something that they need to bring to the attention of their supervisor. If you did have a party the night before, I'm not inclined to tell my boss that I did that when I'm going into work the next day. But if I understand how that impacts my ability to manage the heat, and if I am well equipped to handle that, then maybe it's not something that I have to bring to my supervisor's attention, because I am well trained and well equipped. But you need to understand when it is something that needs to come to the supervisor's attention. Hey, I'm actually not going to be able to do the work that I normally do. So we're either going to have to switch something up, and that's going to be dependent on you having that good relationship with your employees, which I make sound maybe easy there. It's not easy, and it does take time. So when we start to heat up, our hearts are going to start to beat faster. We're going to have more blood grow to our skin, and that's because that blood theoretically should be cooling like a radiator. And then we also have evaporative cooling from our sweat, but like I mentioned, humidity is going to significantly impact our ability to do that effectively. So when it's very, very humid, we're still going to sweat, but then that sweat is not going to evaporate. And so we're not going to experience any cooling effect from that. So then we're just, very hot and also wet. So not a good mix there. So these are the ways that the body cools itself. So I mentioned the sweating. We also have conduction, convection, radiation, actually losing some of our heat. And these are the means by which we manage that heat burden that's being placed on our body. And so it's when one of these or all of these fail that that burden starts to overload us, and then we become overwhelmed and start to experience the symptoms of some kind of illness. Like I said, that can go straight to heat exhaustion or straight to heat stroke. Doesn't have to start with one of the smaller ones. So being acclimated to the heat is a super important aspect of heat illness prevention. When you are acclimated, you're going to experience more efficient sweating. Your core temperature is going to be more stable. You're going to have more efficient blood flow to your skin, and it will be more cooling. You will get that radiator effect. And then your heart rate recovery is also going to be more efficient. So all of this takes time, but once you have acclimated, you are better able to manage the heat burden that's being placed on your body. This is very important. The vast majority of heat illnesses happen to an employee in their first week of work or upon their return from a long absence, which according to OSHA, I think is classified as like 2 weeks off. So if you've had 2 weeks off and you come back and you have a strenuous job that's out in the heat, you've lost some of that acclimatization, and that's important. Okay, when we talk about heat illness prevention, heat is a known workplace hazard, and you have an obligation as an employer to protect against it. One place that's going to be covered is with the general duty clause. So the general duty clause is going to demand that we as employers provide our employees with a workplace that is free from known hazards. Another way that this is going to be covered is through hazard assessment. You're going to be obligated by OSHA to perform a hazard assessment. If heat is an obvious one in your workplace, then you're going to need to assess that hazard and address it appropriately. OSHA currently has a national emphasis program. So if you see OSHA, they will be asking you about your heat illness prevention plan. Like I mentioned, you should have already performed a hazard assessment, but it may be a little less obvious to design a plan that is specifically for heat illness prevention. And that is what you're going to need to do. What we're going to sort of do here is you should have a written plan. It needs to have a purpose. It's going to have a scope. And I recognize that I'm making this sound a bit easy. It's not. And this purpose written here and this scope here is obviously quite broad. That's actually one of the big issues with heat illness prevention and why it's been sort of difficult to regulate, because each of your work sites is going to be unique. So these are just broad, sweeping, a purpose and a scope. So your main elements of your plan are going to be training your supervisors and workers, making sure that they have the appropriate training. These are some of the specifics for when you might want to implement monitoring. But again, this is quite general because the risk can be very specific to a job. So in this example, we put that, we're going to train our supervisors and our workers specific to their job, and then also train them with the ability to recognize if someone, signs and symptoms that someone might be experiencing a heat-related illness. We're going to monitor the weather when the temperatures exceed 70 degrees Fahrenheit. And then we're going to conduct a heat hazard assessment when they exceed 70 degrees also. And in this example, we're using a wet bulb globe temperature monitor, which we'll discuss as we kind of roll through some of our tools. And then we're going to implement appropriate heat illness prevention strategies. Obviously, that is a general statement, and you're going to have to figure out what's best for you. And you have to make sure that what you offer, you make that very easy for your employees to use. So for instance, if you're going to offer a cooled break room with cool drinks and cool air coming across your employees, that's great. But if you give your employees a 15-minute break and it's a 10-minute walk to the break room, that's obviously not a meaningful prevention strategy. You need to make sure that what you're doing makes sense for your employees, it's accessible for your employees, it's easy for them to do. I really do find that most people want to do the right thing as long as you do make it easy for them. This isn't a heat-related example, but just as an example, we had a break room with tables and chairs, which is pretty common for a break room, but here at OHD, where then when we were going through COVID, we were advising that people stay 6 feet apart, but we then made it where the break room, most people are pretty much taking their breaks around the same time, but the break room had where people would then be seated within 6 feet of each other. So we could have been more mindful about that, right? And made it where we were alternating breaks, having more space, putting it where there weren't 2 chairs within 6 feet of each other. Then you don't even have the option, right? So it's just about making things easy, making it easy for people to do the right thing. Okay. I kind of digress a little bit, but you get the idea. So good training, hopefully, when you get it, right? You want that training to be engaging. And I'm sorry, I sort of switched topics here. So this is where we're starting to talk about, once we've got a plan in place, we're going to talk about the tools that we have for that. But training, You know when you get it, you wanna make sure it's engaging, you wanna make sure it addresses the specific situations that your employees are gonna be facing in their specific jobs. And once you have some good training in place, well, I like to use what I'm calling nudge signage. I don't know if that's like an appropriate term, because I do think that's a technical term for a type of signage, but just little reminders that are gonna tell you, hey, keep in mind that there is a heat hazard here, or hey, here's a quick reminder for what the difference between heat exhaustion and heat stroke symptoms are, and here's how we, perform first aid. Here's what we're going to do in those situations. So this can help keep things sort of top of mind for your employees. Another very common one is a urine color chart. We all have to pee, and of course we all have the ability to look at it. And it really doesn't hurt to have this reminder. I prefer the one with the more, detailed instruction. Actually, I haven't been using this, so I'm not sure if y'all can see my mouse, but I prefer the one with more detailed instruction, but you're gonna know what's best for your guys, right? And just depends on what you feel like is gonna resonate with your people, and what they're gonna use is what's gonna work, right? So just anything to help us mitigate some of that risk. And staying hydrated is a big one. Another big thing is, while it can be important to replenish electrolytes when you're doing really strenuous work, it's not really important to replenish electrolytes if you're not. And you're gonna see a lot of people sort of overdoing the Gatorade, overdoing these actually quite sugary beverages sometimes, and actually don't think that like it's not that much better for you to use sugar-free things. There's a lot of artificial stuff that we don't know exactly how it's going to help our bodies manage the heat, and water is really one of the best things you can do. So rely heavily on water first, and then implement electrolytes when it's appropriate, not before that. Another big thing that I didn't touch on is the caffeine. So I mentioned alcohol earlier, and the slide mentioned caffeine, but obviously I'm addicted to caffeine, but we use a lot of caffeine, a lot of people do. But one thing I'll see a lot of young guys doing who are outdoor workers is essentially like slamming Monster energy drinks. You really want to watch out for that. That is going to significantly impact the ability of those young men to manage that heat, or young women. Just what I've seen here is a lot of young men working outside and using Monster energy drinks. And that is a big red flag for what they've either been trained on, or how they're mitigating their thirst or their heat, or however they're feeling after, whatever, maybe, you never know. A lot of us, maybe, I know myself, like not getting enough sleep, I'm not hydrating well. If I were doing a strenuous job, I'd be having some trouble. Okay, one of the other tools in your toolbox is going to be the heat index. This is what meteorologists are referencing when they say the feels like temperature, and this is where you're going to see that relative humidity playing in. One of the biggest things you can note here is this limitation. So this is a very significant limitation. These heat index values were devised under shady light wind conditions. So if you are having exposure to full sun, these values would increase by up to 15 degrees. So that's huge. So just recognize the limitations of this heat index, especially if you're going to apply it in, so this is a sort of best practice example of how you can implement an action plan based on that heat index. But then keep in mind, this heat index is not going to directly apply to your circumstance if your workers are working in direct sun, which I hope they're not, but there's a lot of opportunities where they would be, right? Outdoor workers, all sorts of stuff where you're going to be outside getting that full sun. But so this is where, if you're in the green, you've got your action plan written out for what you're gonna do. If you're in the green, then you still got your guys with easy access to drinking water. You have a plan for if you do have some sort of emergency, because that's just always gonna be top of mind. And then make sure that you've already trained your workers on what to do. This is where everything's good. We've already gone through our training. We're just ready in case something happens. As it moves into the yellow, then you want to go ahead and alert your workers that, hey, we're kind of inching towards that danger zone. You want to encourage the drinking of water, maybe even implement like mandatory breaks with a recommended amount of water to be drinking during that break. Sort of try to remove any aspects that you can of the physical I just got a message from Dawn. Yes, we will be discussing the AHA heat stress application. I thought you were busy doing lockout, tagout, Dawn. Okay. That really threw me off. I love you some Dawn. Okay, so if we're getting into that yellow zone, then we're concerned a little bit, we're giving workers some ability, maybe removing some of the physical aspects using mechanical lifting where possible, things like that. Then as you get into that red zone, then this is where you start thinking about things like moving, work around where you're working in the cooler parts of the day, earlier start times, things like that. Maybe doing toolbox talks that address heat specifically at the beginning of every shift. It's just getting a little more serious, right? So you're taking it a little more serious. Okay, this is not the AHA heat stress app. That's on the next slide, but this is OSHA's app. It's also good. There's a Spanish version. It does a pretty good job. I've got it on my phone. It's free and it can help you take that first step to monitoring that heat index, and it gives you some precautions. It lists them out, helps you mitigate some of that heat stress stuff. This is that AHA heat stress application. Obviously, a lot, I don't want to say a lot more. That's not fair. A lot of work went into this app. I know the people who developed it, and it's very good. It's going to help you. You're going to select a location. It's going to give you that WBGT index, which is a little more than the heat index is offering, and it's going to give you some recommendations that are a little more detailed for how you can address the risk at your specific environment. And so these are those sort of inching into environmental monitoring technology with the app that's going to be that heat index and the WBGT is going to be sort of based on your precise location. But if you need to go the next step, then what you're going to get a widget, a WBGT. This is your wet bulb globe temperature monitor. It's going to, like I mentioned, consider a little bit more than just the temperature and humidity. It's also going to look at wind speed. It's going to look at the intensity of the sun. This is something that you're going to set out in a specific area. So for instance, when I worked for the Army, we would set it out every day when heat was a concern. I think our trigger point was the 70 degrees Fahrenheit. And once it was set up, then if we reached any of the thresholds that we had set, most likely based on ACGIH's or OSHA might even have some of the recommendations for work rest schedule, we would alert people. We had a flag we would run up for whether conditions were green, yellow, red. And then there were different points where work would actually cease out in our training area. But that's one way to use it. So this is going to, this is just another example of a widget, but it's going to collect those readings and it can communicate them. It can do it via email, via text. You're going to be the ones sending that out. You can set up a system that's going to be able to say, okay, once it lets me know that I've hit this thing, I'm going to then radio out or send an email or send a text. For the Army, we actually did all of the above, and then also, like I mentioned, ran the flag up the flagpole so that most people could then see when we'd hit those dangerous conditions. I know that our civilian workers were pretty well trained. I can't speak to the soldiers. That's a weird divide with the Army, where as the industrial hygienist, I was able to have some control over what our civilian employees were getting, but the soldiers were different. So I assume they were getting some training, and I hope that it was helpful and that they understood what was going on. But we did have heat illnesses happen every summer at the Army facility that I worked at, and 99% of the time it was someone who was coming from somewhere else, so not acclimated, to then come work at this training site where you're running exercises that are really supposed to be simulating war. So you can imagine how intense it might get. And yeah, we would have someone come, and within that first week, they would be the ones to succumb to a heat illness, which is a real shame, because then that person, like I mentioned before, is now at a deficit. So they're going to have a greater chance of succumbing to a future heat-related illness. So this is just an example. If you have an area that is, and in the interest of full disclosure, OHD does sell some heat monitoring instrumentation. For the record, we do not sell the things that I'm talking about right now, and I'll discuss when we are selling them. But if you have a facility that you know that heat is always going to be a concern, then there are stationary devices that you can put up that are going to be able to alert you at whatever level you set. If you set a particular level to be of concern, they're going to be able to alert you via email, text, whatever. So if you have a site and that's something that you really need, there are devices where you can set them up and they're going to be able to communicate with you. They'll have visible and audible alerts that can let you know when you hit different levels. Okay, these are some portable devices. They can also be stationary, and these are for both indoor and outdoor use. One of the most common places I've seen these is actually for like practice fields for athletics. So both college and professional athletics, for instance, Auburn University, I don't know if they have this particular brand of solution, but they do have one of these set up for their practice field. And once it hits a certain temperature here in Alabama, as it is wont to do, then they will alternate when they're having their practices and push them away from that hottest part of the day to protect their players. And you're seeing this get even serious with high school athletics. We had some really unfortunate events over the past several years of even high school athletes succumbing to the heat. And so you've seen this be taken more seriously at that level. These are some of the accessories that you can pair with those different solutions. So with your widget, with that, with a permanently monitored system, or with the stationary or permanent outdoor system. And they all have benefits, and it just depends on what's going to work best for your situation. So an anemometer, you can have solar panels, you can have that audible and visual alert system. So all sorts of things that you could do, and pretty much all of the different companies who offer these things are going to have comparable accessories for how you can equip your system. Okay, this is actually kind of a newer thing that I can't speak to having used it, but I did think it was pretty cool. So it's Kestrel, and these are supposed to be like essentially a handheld wet bulb glow temperature, also does heat index, and then one that you could also like hook to your belt that would be just evaluating that environment around that particular employee or wherever you're hitting it. So just a little bit more portable, smaller way of doing that WBGT monitoring. These are designed for like athletes, or for our industrial athletes, those construction workers, or if you're working on, that's a real term. It's a real term. Yes, our industrial athletes. And so again, haven't personally used these, but did think it was pretty cool. And I know that Auburn is currently evaluating these in different studies to see how accurate they are. So kind of just a cool emerging thing. So this is how you would implement that, right? So if you are using one of these environmental monitoring technologies, you would go ahead and keep track, obviously, of the temperature readings that you're getting. You would have the level of activity that people are performing in their specific job. You would have what PPE they're wearing, because obviously, whatever clothing you're having to wear, particularly, you think about like firefighting turnout gear. Well, obviously you're already fighting fire, it's quite hot. But that turnout gear is putting a real significant burden, because it has to protect you from that kind of heat. It's putting a real burden. Same thing for your like flame retardant workwear that you might have to use. Anything that you're putting on your body is going to impact your body's ability to handle that heat burden. Then you want to establish what your work rest schedule is going to be, what's appropriate based on those things. And then the supervisor is going to know, okay, well, these people are able to work for 30 minutes, then they have to take a 15-minute break, or whatever it ends up being for your specific situation. Now, when that's not feasible, like obviously environmental monitoring is going to have some pitfalls, right? It's not going to account for any of those personal factors that we talked about. So physiological monitoring, by contrast, is going to be real-time, continuous, and individualized. So physiological monitoring is going to track heat strain. So it's not tracking like environmental factors is tracking the heat strain. And it's gonna work best when the sensor is against the skin and the display is visible outside of the personal protective equipment. There are a lot of options for physiological monitoring technology. So I'm talking about everything as simple as a heart rate monitor, making sure that you're able to then, reference your phone to see what your heart rate is, or maybe it's gonna go to your watch, whatever. It's got a way for you to monitor that outside of all the personal protective equipment, because your heart rate monitor is gonna be up against your chest under all your clothing. And then all the way up to what we have now with different core temperature tracking, armbands, pretty advanced technology, inner ear, we'll see some of those. So how we sort of got here is just understand that if you see here what the direct measurement options were, then you could see pretty quickly that that's not ideal. There's not a lot of situations where, yeah, you get the idea. I don't have to give it to you. So, and then indirect measurements they weren't working well in the heat. So there are a lot of wearable options. So I mentioned, some older, like a heart rate monitor. But some of these new wearables are showing great promise, and each one sort of has a proprietary algorithm that's going to estimate the core body temperature and then make recommendations. It can be based on thresholds that you've set, or based on ACGIH's threshold limit values. So I have to give credit where credit is due. These next few slides I got directly from the man, the myth, the legend, Don Ellswick. So what are the benefits? So real-time feedback can aid in early intervention, and that's obvious, right? So addressing heat strain before symptoms present, before it's an actual illness, right? So that's where you're getting that risk assessment portion of physiological monitoring. For heat-related illnesses, obviously you should not solely rely on any one of these devices. No device is going to be a complete substitute for you training your employees to recognize the signs and symptoms of heat illness. So you would never ignore any signs or symptoms that were indicating some sort of heat illness. The role of physiological monitoring for risk assessment is to provide some objective data to help you make decisions to either stop or modify what is obviously some sort of exposure. Physiological monitoring provides real-time information for us safety leaders to inform our decisions with data, and to also make them more personalized regarding the work-rest ratios, the implementation of extended breaks, or just that early recognition of heat strain before any illness occurs. So real-time data is also going to help you identify any of your locations in work sites where workers might be at higher risk for greater heat strain. So if you notice a group of workers, you're able to monitor them all, and you notice that they're having, their numbers are ticking up quicker than other people's, then that can help you target that work site, right? That might be the area where you need to invest some more time in mitigating the heat. And so that can help inform that decision. Data collected from workers can also be used to assess the effectiveness of any of the specific heat-related interventions that you try. So for example, data could be collected before and after you implement maybe body cooling vests. And that way you're then going to be able to determine if those body cooling vests can serve as a means to alleviate the heat strain. Or by contrast, are they actually introducing more burden, maybe with weight or whatever? Once your people are trained and understand the benefits of physiological monitoring and this technology, they can use that data to work better, not harder. So they're going to be able to view their own numbers. And like I mentioned, if your guys are well equipped and they have a good understanding of how to sort of mitigate their own heat burden, this can be a great tool for them. Because if they're able to see, okay, when I do this particular task, I'm heating up more quickly. Well, maybe there's a better way I can do this. Or maybe this is one where we need to go ahead and implement some sort of mechanical lifting, whatever. So once your employees understand what's going on, and if you've trained them well, then they're actually going to be a great resource for where you can implement a really effective intervention, where your money might be best spent to invest in addressing a specific task or a specific area. Once they understand, it's going to really help, and that helps you not have to, monitor continuously. If they know too, then they're going to be able to help inform some of your decisions also. So this is just summing all of that up. So you've got the risk assessment, you've got the decision making. It's going to help you assess the usefulness of your interventions, and then it's going to help educate your employees. It's going to help them understand better how the heat's impacting them, and that can actually, you can actually see behavior change, which we know is one of the biggest hurdles when it comes to safety. So this can be a benefit of that. So several organizations have proposed monitoring guidelines for core body temperature. So this is what those different devices are relying on. So these thresholds are what you can utilize to essentially assess individual heat strain. And even though these temperature thresholds do exist, it's important to know that we're still sort of working to make them better. A lot of these different companies are still doing research to help address even more individual factors. So your acclimatization, gender, how it's playing into all that. These are some examples. I mentioned that it's quite a wide array of what's out there. These are some of those examples for physiological monitoring technology. So I said it's, as simple as a heart rate monitor up to this. This is the core technology, which I think connects to the body track earpiece, where this is designed for athletes. But I do see how it could translate easily to our industrial athletes. But the one that we talk about that OHD is partnered with is the Slate Safety armband. There are getting more with more technology into your own, like Apple Watch or to your other devices. They can notify you when you are having heart rate, significant heart rate changes. I can't remember if you can set those thresholds or what they're based on, but so obviously we're inching closer and closer to having, a lot of things really monitored by some sort of wearable device. And I think we'll keep seeing that. Okay, I just got a question. How can you monitor employees working in extremely remote locations doing outdoor work in difficult terrain? Okay, I don't know how the limited satellite signal is going to impact like a Slate Safety armband. Because that's a really good question, because this is something that we've identified as a real benefit for the armbands is for remote workers, right? Mm-hmm. So if you're going out and you're working on your own, then this is a way that your supervisor can monitor you. But if you've got a limited signal, I don't know how that's going to impact. I would say that, it's still going to be able to communicate with the employee. So at least they would be able to get a notification for something, getting out of those. And maybe the advice then would be, even before they're hitting yellow, that you're just saying, okay, you're not going to be going out into that difficult terrain right now. We're going to wait till a cooler time, whatever. Okay, Dawn, if you send me a message, it's right in front of my face. I'm gonna mention it. So yes, that AIHA, the slides that I had from Don Ellswick, those were from a talk he gave at AIHA Connect. And the AIHA white paper, I put it on the slides as a reference, but it is going to discuss the indirect measurements and how they demonstrated really poor validity when you were working in heat. Obviously, we've already mentioned that the direct measurement, so the pills that you have to take or doing rectal temperatures is not great. And it is important to note that the most common core body temperature, so heart rate and heart rate recovery, and then physiological strain index. Those are important notes, and I appreciate it, Don. Okay, so with these different physiological monitoring. Oh, okay, this is actually good. Don is saying that Cell works for Border Patrol and remote workers. So you can store that data on the band and then download it later. And there's direct non-Cell data access, which I don't actually know what that would then, I don't know what that really means. If you want to elaborate, Don, I'll communicate to the group. Or can everyone see? I don't even know.
They'll be able to see.
Okay. So with the physiological monitoring technologies, you can go to also a decision-making logic chart. So physiological monitoring is gonna be what you wanna do when that work rest schedule doesn't work out, or the PPE you're using is a significant contributor to the heat burden. You wanna select your monitor, so what you're gonna be using, reference some appropriate limits, and then outline what's gonna happen, when readings reach particular levels, right? So if it's heart rate monitors, then when heart rate reaches a certain point, what you're gonna do, or if you are using one of the armbands, what core body temperatures, are you gonna follow ACGIH? That's preset on the device, or are you gonna implement your own, maybe more conservative? You're gonna document all of that, and then obviously it's gonna need to be specific to the job, and then your supervisor needs to be aware. Just got another question. When did the new OSHA heat regulations go into effect? I actually don't know when the new heat regulations go into effect. I know that OSHA currently has a national emphasis program. So like I mentioned, I think I already talked about this, that if OSHA comes to visit you, then they're going to look at what you're doing to mitigate your heat hazards. If anyone else does know when OSHA's new heat, I actually am not aware. Okay, Slate Safety recommends using a hub or companion app to provide an alternate internet path if you don't have good cell service. That's really good to know. Thank you again, Don. So this is the device. So again, in the interest of yeah, that's true. So there is the national emphasis program, but it is important to note that several states do have already have regulations for heat stress state plans, and then I guess OSHA is going to have some regulation 2 coming into effect. So Slate Safety, the BioTrack system, is what OHD sells. This is who we're partnered with, Slate Safety, and so this is designed with a proprietary algorithm to evaluate your core temperature from an armband, and it's going to give you, real-time core temperature. It's going to tell you your heart rate, and it's going to give you a level of exertion. So this is supposed to be designed as, this is a bit of a marketing slide, but the toughest work over the largest distances. So obviously they have some solution for you being in that tough terrain, to whomever asked about that. And this is then what you're doing on how you're going to, sort of apply that decision-making logic here. So you've got your personal biodata being collected, and you're going to have the heart rate and the core temperature. You're going to take that personal data and compare it to the allowable readings from ACGIH's TLVs for heat stress and heat strain. This again doesn't mean that you're ever going to ignore any signs and symptoms. And then you're just going to follow those. So with that biodata, you're going to be able to inform decisions, and you're going to be able to see how people are doing in the heat wherever they might be. So this is an example of how this is going to look from your perspective. Again, I really can't emphasize enough how obviously if you're going to have this sort of tracking system on your employees, then you also need to have that culture of trust, right? You want your employees to understand that this is for a good purpose. This is, in case something happens to you, this helps us make sure that we have the right, response plan in place, especially if you are a lone worker. But so you're going to have the people who are in the green. It's going to alert on your body. It's going to send notifications to your supervisor. And so, yeah, everyone is sort of able to track how someone is doing in the heat. And so that's okay. Don just posted some more stuff off of Slate Safety. And yes, you will get a copy of these slides. So does anyone have any other questions? That's all I got. I think I went a little fast, sorry.
Right. I learned about industrial athletes today, which is a thing that
it is a thing. Hey, y'all need to tell her. She's apparently never been an industrial athlete. I worked out in the mill and did stuff. It's definitely comparable. It sounds tough. It's tough.
Oh wow. Again, some housekeeping. Oh, there we go. Thank you, Marianne.
Gosh, I would, I haven't even thought about it. I should have thought about it because we're currently freezing here in the office. I should have worn one, but I would assume so. Dawn, do you know if the armband can be used for cold temperatures also? Dawn's gotta be on there. Did he abandon me now? I feel like, they would have to be the same way they're monitoring. It would have to be, oh, no, they don't do cold. Well, there you go.
Please feel free to keep sending in any questions. I'm just gonna talk about something real quick, but Stephanie just had a light bulb moment. So
Oh, I was just saying, just a friendly reminder about the CEUs,
Yes.
that maybe what you were gonna do, yeah.
Yes, if you qualify or want to get CEUs, continuing education credits for this course, what you can do is leave your name in the Q&A, or you can email me, Laura Flowers, that is lflowers@ohdglobal.com. So just L Flowers. That would be great. Valerie, thank you. Henry, yes, appreciate y'all. And then like Stephanie said, you will get a copy of these slides. Those will be coming to you this week. So we really appreciate it.
Okay, and we've got so an anonymous person put in about the heat injury and illness prevention in outdoor and indoor work settings proposed rule is still in the post hearing comment period. So that's open until the end of September of this year. So it'll still be a while before that gets implemented. As far as my opinion on the NIOSH heat stress app, is that the same one as the OSHA heat stress app? Or the AI, because so I have the OSHA heat stress app, which I do like. It looks at the heat index, and then I have the AIHA heat stress app, which I like a bit more. But it just depends on they're both good. So just the AIHA app tries to be a little more specific and go a little more in depth about some of the recommendations.
Nice.
Yes.
That sounds good.
We just had some horrible thunder here.
We sure did. No heat.
Different weather related.
Thank you everyone for sending in your email addresses. If you have like if there are a lot of you and you don't feel like typing everybody's emails in here, like I said, you can email me lflowers@ohdglobal.com and we will make sure to get it. Or
you will have to be, your real name will have to have been on this attendance list or typed in here, because I do have to provide that as documentation of your attendance. So make sure that either your name showed up on the attendees list, or if you have multiple people in the room, that you have written their names into this chat, because I have to show that you at least at some point were
in the room.
Yes,
that makes sense. We just learned that NIOSH OSHA is a joint app. Thank you, Rex.
Okay, yes, so the OSHA app I do like. It does the heat index, and it gives you some recommendations. It's a little more general. It's still great for a toolbox talk, and it does put everything in pretty like simple terms, whereas the AIHA app does get a little verbose, but I mean I like that. Okay, sorry to hear about, don't think it's optional work due to the extreme environment. I know you're anonymous, but I would love to hear more about where you're working and what you're doing. If you would like to email me about that, that'd be great. What is there? Okay, what controls can be done if limited vapor use coveralls are used in environments above 30 degrees Celsius? I mean, I would have to go look at my TLV book to figure out, what level that is, and that's the same reference I would use. I don't know if that's helpful. If you want to email me specifically, I can actually do that and we can dive in together. So I'm slynch@ohdglobal.com.
Awesome. I think the chat has slowed down for CEU requests. We really appreciate it.
Oh yeah, Tom Bernard has isn't his thing through his university? Okay, yeah. Okay, so whoever asked about the vapor coveralls, Tom Bernard has data on clothing allowance factors through ACGIH. And then also through his university, which right now for some reason I'm struggling. And I reference his ergonomic stuff. I use it for all of my labs. For my industrial ergonomics course. Anyway. University of South Florida. Thank you, Don. I tell you what,
Don,
I don't,
man, he's the
I know.
MVP of this.
I don't even Google things anymore. I just ask Don.
Just ask Don, I would too.
Y'all can ask Don too. His email is.
Thank you all again. We really appreciate you attending. We hope that you will join us for our webinars throughout the week. Tomorrow we have a webinar on respirator fit testing and respiratory protection in conjunction with Safe Plus Sound Week. You do get a CEU for that too. And then the next day we have air sampling. Again, you get a CEU, so please just keep on joining us if you're free, and we would love to have you. There is one more question.
How much do the wearable bands weigh? They're very light.
Oh yeah,
They're super light. I mean, you can barely feel it on you, but I don't know. You know what? I bet Dawn knows. I bet Dawn knows. I don't know if Dawn already left, but Dawn's on here.
I hope that you guys can see the answered question in the chat that I just sent. Oh yeah, like a wristwatch. Thank you, Henry. That is.
I mean, it is
Yeah,
like a
it's
wristwatch.
very-
It's a little more
Yeah.
broad, and it has a little bit more contact with your skin, but and you wear it up on your arm, obviously. But yeah, it's very comparable in weight to my Apple Watch. It's probably a little bit more, but I mean, you're talking about fractions of ounces.
That makes sense. In the chat, I answered a question from an anonymous attendee with my email lflowers@ohdglobal.com. So please feel free to email if for some reason you forget. You can just use the contact us form on our website and somehow you will find me, I promise. Just say you're looking for the webinar.
Yes.
Great. Awesome. Thanks again for joining, everyone. Have a great day.
Thanks, guys. Bye.